Here's one. In looking at how technology is progressing and plans to merge us with AI, artificial intelligence, in the near future, do you have a time frame that you think would be the latest that Jesus comes back to get us? Well, again, on the one hand, I really don't know. But looking at technology, just from technology's perspective, if the transhumanists are correct, and that's a big if, but let's assume that they are for just a moment, they are predicting, so people like Ray Kurzweil and many others who are the pioneers and the champions of the artificial intelligence research, but also of transhumanism and something called the singularity. The singularity is where mankind has fully merged with machine, etc. And we are now on our way to becoming humanity 2.0. And so they kind of see it as a parabolic graph. Okay, so we're somewhere in here, and then soon it's going to go up and straight up. And when it goes straight up, then we essentially become infinite, limitless, and that's the point of the singularity, where we really transcend all of our human limitations. So they're predicting that that is going to happen by 2045. Is that an accurate date? Well, Ray Kurzweil has been pretty accurate in a lot of his predictions about what is coming in the future. So, you know, I think he could be correct. Now, what's interesting about that date? Let's assume that that's the date of the singularity, and from the biblical perspective, what I would see coinciding with that would be when the Antichrist or the beast goes into the temple and he declares himself to be God, showing that he is God, right? Now, it's very important that that little extra little tag there. So this is in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So it says, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. All right, that's 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. I'm just going to share that with you guys really quick here so you can see it with your own eyes. Powerful passage. Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Wow. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be capitalized. There really are no capitals in Greek. I mean, there are, but they're not used the same way that we would use capital letters. And so here we have the word theon. Now, this could be the true God, or it could be a God. Either way, this guy is pretty amazing, right? Because he is the son of perdition. So, son of perdition, the man of sin, the beast, commonly known as the Antichrist, all the same person. He's also known as the little horn. He's kind of Mr. Big Mouth, right? In book of Daniel, he's going to be blaspheming those in heaven. In Revelation chapter 13, he's going to be given 42 months to blaspheme those in heaven, right? So he's also the blasphemer. So this guy is all of those things. Let's just call him the Antichrist for now, for sake of popularity. We'll call him that. He is going to go in to this temple of God, which makes me think that the temple of God, where else is the temple? God's temple, assuming Paul is speaking about the one true God, which I suppose he would be. I don't know why he wouldn't. If that's the God we're talking about, then the temple of God, which was, of course, still standing in Paul's day, that temple would need to be rebuilt, or some variation of that temple. And that is where we believe, many of us at least, believe that there will be a temple in the last days there will be sacrifices happening in the last days, that he will turn off those sacrifices in the last days. Where do we see that? Well, we see it in Daniel chapter 11. We hear about these gods, that he's going to regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall exalt himself above them all. Right? He's going to exalt himself above them all. This is important because he's not all just hot air. He is a lot of hot air, to be sure, but he also has the wherewithal to do these things. And so this Antichrist fellow is going to be very, very powerful. Now, in Daniel chapter 8, it says, therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken. That would be Alexander the Great. And in place of it, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. Well, these are the 4 generals that came up after Alexander. And out of one of them came a little horn. All right, so we have the picture of Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus IV, who came up, and he is a type, a foreshadow of the coming Antichrist. So out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. Now notice here, it says, and it grew up to the host of heaven. Now the host of heaven is a common reference to angels, good or bad, all right? Good or bad angels. And it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. Now we also see in Revelation chapter 12, John says, and I saw a sign in heaven, and I saw this great red dragon, and he drew 1/3 of the stars with his tail. And then it says, and so Satan was cast to the earth and his angels with him. All right, so I believe here in Daniel chapter 8 and Revelation chapter 12, it's not talking about literal stars out in the heavenly night sky that are burning out there, Alpha Centauri, Betelgeuse, all those. It's not talking about those, but this is here using symbolic language, and then the symbolic language is defined for us to speak about angels. All right, so what happens? That this little horn is going to grow up to the host of heaven. He's going to grow up to the host of heaven. What that says to me, and I document all this in my book, Corrupting the Image, but he grows up to the host of heaven, that he becomes one of them. He actually becomes part of the host of heaven. He becomes an angel. How does he do that? He has his DNA mingled with Satan's DNA, and he literally becomes a Nephilim or a hybrid, whatever you want to call him, is what he becomes. And so then he has the power. And recall that it says in Revelation chapter 12, chapter 13, says in Revelation chapter 13, that this one is going to give his power to this person. Okay, so it says they worshipped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth to blaspheme and blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. Okay, so I haven't forgotten the question. I have not forgotten the question. All right, the question was, I'm getting back to that in just a moment then. But so the dragon gives him his power, his throne, and great authority. All right, so he gets all these things. And let's go really quick back to Daniel. And I haven't forgotten the question. I'm coming back to that in just a second. So this Antichrist figure, this beast, this little horn, he is going to be able to cast some of the stars down to the ground. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. I understand that to be Michael the archangel. And by him, the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth down to the ground. He did all this and he prospered. All right, so the singularity. Okay, that's where we started this question. How did we get here? We started with the question about the singularity. So the singularity, the question of the singularity, when could all these things take place? Again, I tell you, I want to make it really clear, I am speculating, okay? But if we understand of the technological advances, if the singularity in fact does happen in 2045, okay, that's a big assumption, but let's just make that assumption for a moment. And the singularity is synonymous with the Antichrist, the beast, actually becoming a hybrid, so that he goes into the temple of God as God, showing himself that he is God, or could be is a God, right? Another way to read that. Then what's happened? This guy now has received this phenomenal power, authority, and throne. He sits on the throne of Satan. This guy has it all. He's got everything. And he's not just a big talker, right? He's not blowing smoke. He's not blowing hot air. He's the real deal. That's very important. And so what I would suggest, that the singularity, the 2045 moment, and the abomination that causes desolation, or when he goes into the temple and says, I'm God, those very well may happen in 2045. If I had to put a date, if I had to put that on the calendar, I would suggest that that's going to happen in Passover of 2045. All right, Passover 2045. I'm speculating. All right, so don't sell the farm. But Passover of 2045 is, I think, a very likely day when this will happen. All right, if it all comes and goes, don't throw stones at me. I told you I was speculating. But as I understand things, trying to put it together, that seems a very likely date. What's interesting about that date is then 3.5 years later, so from Passover of 2045, so Passover usually falls in March or April. I haven't looked it up to figure out which month it's going to fall in, but it's easy to do. So March or April of 2045, 6 months later, guess what? That puts us in the time of the fall feast. And the fall feast, I believe, is when Jesus is going to come back in the year, get it? 2048. It would be fall of 2048. And that would be roughly 3.5. Actually, it's to the date. If it's 180 days, or so half a year in the biblical year, 180 days, that would put us from is it the eve of Passover or Passover itself, from that day until, maybe it's first fruits. I did the math and I'm forgetting it. But if we go from there till Yom Kippur is 180 days. It's amazing. And so that would be then 3.5 years later is when Jesus would come back. I find that quite interesting. Now, what's also interesting about that date is that Israel, the modern state of Israel, was founded in 1948. And according to Genesis chapter 15, a generation could be 100 years. Now I say could be because we also have in Psalm 90, it says that the days of our lives are 70 years. And if by reason of strength, 80. All right. So if the 1948 date is significant, again, if it's significant, then the 70 years was 2018. Well, that's come and gone. So that clearly is not it. The next potential date could be 2028. I'm finding that a little hard to conceive of, but things could happen, I suppose. You know, I mean, when it happens, it happens. So that seems to be the next time on the calendar. And then the next one will be 2048. If none of these are it, then this theory is completely wrong. Okay. So again, don't sell your farm, keep your day job, and don't stress about it. But it's fun to speculate a little bit that 2048, again, if any of the things I said is remotely accurate, which they may not be, then 2048 would seem to be the time in conjunction with the technology of when Jesus is going to come back. So, boy, that was fun. Great question. Great question.